Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Welcome to High Strangeness. I'm Tony, and this is a place where we talk about all things strange and unexpected in our reality. Today is a random strangeness episode, and I have with me my co-host Anthony, who is a regular voice on the show. And so
How's it
we're going to
going?
hit it. We're going to hit it today with a few topics and just share our thoughts about it and get into it a little bit. So Anthony, how have things been going with you? How have the holidays been?
It's good. Just hanging out with the family, trying to enjoy the holidays. Everything slows down a little bit. It seems like everyone makes the excuse of not doing anything until after the holidays. Like, hey, do you want to go on a trip? Yeah, let's do it after the holidays. Hey, do you want to buy this thing? Oh yeah, hit me up after the holidays. Everything's after the holidays, so it's just kind of slow, and it's like enjoying family time right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I've made a couple trips. One in October and be doing one here in December soon. I feel like the seasons are going quick. I'm not sure I'm going to do that again because I feel like the seasons go quick and it makes it tough to get things done at home. I don't enjoy the holidays as much, and then even at work, I'm rushing around. So probably won't do that quite that way in future years. So
Yeah, I find that sometimes when I'm working on projects or whatever during the holidays, that if I want the project to be done and I'm like looking forward to it being over and it coincides with kind of the time frame of a holiday, like then naturally that, that period passes really fast. I'm like, oh man, I didn't want that part to go
right,
fast, but I wanted this other stuff to be done. And
yeah,
so during the holidays, it won't happen again this year, but for the last few years, I've been like, I just want to like hang out and not do anything, no
yeah,
projects, nothing like that. And I always end up having something that I work on, and it makes everything fly by.
yeah. It definitely is doing that this year for me too. So yeah, living and learning and deciding. I don't think I'm going to do that quite that way next year. So, well, look, as we get into this random strangeness episode, I have a question for you. Have you ever ran into somebody or bumped into somebody that was so thick and solid that you felt like you ran into a wall? Have you ever done that in school or just with people you've been around?
Yeah, I mean, I know some big people, so I wouldn't say they were. There's probably one person that I ran into once that I didn't know that was like as solid as a wall. He was like 6'8", just thick, big guy, muscular, thick, and
Wow.
yeah, it was like you know running into Superman. I thought like when I hit his chest, it was like my head bounced like off his pecs. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Was this
But
at the gym or something, or where did you run into this person?
it was years ago. We were out somewhere, and he was trying to be he was trying to be tough and go after someone that was in our group, a
Oh,
gal, and I was just like, "Hey, man." And then as I like touched him, I just realized he was immovable, and I was like, "Please, if you wouldn't mind, leave us alone." But you can still bother us if you want. That's fine because he was
yeah.
just solid.
Yeah, it's kinda like one of those funny comedies where somebody does something to somebody and then they realize, "What did I just do?" Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah. I
sure.
joked that I like put my hand on his abs like this guy, and
Yeah,
just like my whole hand was like one ab, and I was like, okay, uh, you
yeah.
can do whatever you want.
Well, it's true. Sometimes these guys are massive, especially these professional wrestlers. This guy is easily 6 foot something and just probably 300 pounds. They get big, and I often think of football players, just, they're not always built like this, but man, they're like tree trunks, just massive and just big.
Yep.
Um, and then, sometimes you run into some of these guys and they're just even their grip and everything like that. So I one time ran into a really one of the he really is the best arm wrestler in the world um, for a really long time, and he lived here in Utah for a while. And and what was his name? Jeez, I'm gonna forget his name. Oh well, great arm wrestler and
I
not
know who
a
you're
very
talking
big
about.
guy, But when I went to shake his hand, I felt like I was grabbing, a cyborg's hand because it was like a rock hard grip and everything like that. And so you see some of these guys, whether they're physically that way or just their arms or whatever, thick as can be. And so I'm thinking of this guy right here. Like, this is a fun movie, Fantastic Four, and this guy is the Thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I often wondered, I wonder in some other galaxy somewhere across the universe, there's actually somebody that looks like this. Could this be real? I don't know. It would be fun, but I bet you that guy I wouldn't want to run into him at all. Hard
Well,
as a rock.
it'd be the Superman conundrum where maybe on another planet he's just a normal guy. When he comes here, his molecular and structure is so dense, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
in our gravity and on our planet, he's just something that's immovable.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Cool for
Yeah.
him.
Do you remember how this guy became like this? Do you remember?
Yeah, so the Thing on Fantastic Four, they were up in a space station or something doing a test, right? Well, I guess that's the earlier 2004 or the earlier Fantastic Four movie. There's another remake that they were like in another dimension or whatever. But anyway, something happens where like this phenomenon or this entity or this energy passes through them and gives them all the members of the team, you know, powers, or it gives them powers, yeah, that make them become like an object that they were standing by, right? So this guy was standing in front of a
Yeah.
rock or whatever, and so when it passed through him, it gave him rock like
Features.
DNA.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. I know. Well, here's the crazy thing. What if I were to tell you that right here on Earth, there is a condition where a person can become kind of rock hard? Not like this, but
Not a cool way.
there's a yeah, not in a cool way, right? There's a condition called the Stone Man syndrome. Before looking at some of these topics, have you had ever heard of the Stone Man syndrome?
Never.
Yeah. So, it makes me think sometimes of like the mythology out there, the mythological creature, Medusa. She's hideous. She's a monster, and she turns every living thing into stone when she looks at them. Well, there's a condition right here on Earth, kind of like Medusa, right? You don't have to look at this condition, but it is a genetic condition that will turn somebody into stone in a way. We'll talk about what that means. We've got some pictures here for people too. So, right now we're going to look at baby's feet. And this is, unfortunately, the beginning signs of this condition in a baby. And so, if you see this, I think most cases they would see this in the hospital and they'd say, we better look at this. But
It's
if
like
you
the
see this at
crooked toe.
home, yes, the crooked toes, the just weird things happening here. That's doesn't mean this is Stone Man syndrome, but it is an early sign of what could be Stone Man syndrome. Now, the condition is also called fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, which ossification, I guess, turning into rock is what that kind of stands for. It's a genetic condition in which muscle and connective tissue, like ligaments and tendons, regenerate as bone. So they don't come back and regenerate the way they were. They now come back as bone, gradually forming a second skeleton over the person's body. So they lose mobility and it's not comfortable either. So here you're seeing deformed toes, and eventually it turns into joint stiffness, movement problems, and it can even progress in other parts of your body like respiratory difficulties. Crazy, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So when I was looking into this, that's very rare. There's
Right.
only 700 cases in the world.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so rare that there's one doctor that specializes in it, and he sees every single case.
Wow.
And half those cases are in the U.S.
I
So
wonder why.
that's also strange. Yeah, that would be the case. Um, it's pretty sad actually. When I looked up some videos in preparation for that topic because I'd never heard of it, and they do even like a conference in Florida where a bunch of these patients and people who suffer from this get together and just have like a little event, a
Yeah.
dance, a dinner, stuff like that, just to create that community. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. When I was watching some videos, they had a lady who was like in her 50s, which is apparently pretty old for
Yeah.
this condition, and her arms and elbows were basically fused to the side. She could only do this,
Mhm.
and her jaw was fused shut. So she had
Wow.
to, several of them actually, their jaw was fused shut. So when they had to eat, they had to smush, they put food in their mouth and like smush it around and just like
Mm.
get it through the gaps of their teeth. That's how they ate. And
Wow.
she was basically, um, I don't want to say frozen, but essentially like almost in a standing position. And so she's in a wheelchair, kind of
Yeah.
leaned back. And when they lifted her up, her legs wouldn't move. So she had to take almost like penguin little baby steps. And then
Mm.
when they laid her down, they showed how stiff she was. And she was stiff as a board. So they would lift her legs up, put her down, lift her legs up, put her back on the ground. And she just rocked like a board, on a bed.
Wow.
And, pretty crazy. And then they had another lady they showed that had the same issue, but her leg. And it's interesting because it starts out, I think it feels like arthritis at
Yeah.
first, like very stiff. And then this one lady was like taking a step or something where her leg was rising up, and that's where it got stuck. So her leg,
Mm.
one leg is like permanently like in a step up position, and she had to create like an 8-inch platform shoe to put under her foot so she could even walk. Um, so it's pretty crazy. And I looked into why. I don't know if you're going to dive into like what exactly happens in this
Nope.
disease,
Go
but
right ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
basically what
Before
happens is,
before you go into it though, this picture right here, and I think it's interesting. This is one case here with this young man trying to make the best of it, but you can see his back's deformed. We'll get into other pictures where they show this as well. But I think it's important to note that these impact people completely different ways. Like you can see all kinds of versions of this hitting people from arms to backs to legs to different things. So that's important. It shows up a lot of different ways. But go ahead and do what you're
yeah,
gonna.
no, I wasn't, yeah, no, you're right. And the doctor that they were interviewing about this said, basically these people are just becoming encased, alive. I mean, at some point they're not going to be able to move anything, and they're alive.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's pretty horrible. Um, so what happens is when you get hurt, typically when you get injured, your immune cells come and they come and basically absorb the damaged tissue, and then they repair it, right?
Yeah.
Put it back so
Yep.
that. So, and I'm not a doctor, full disclosure. So this is just what I learned on YouTube. But so what happens in this case is when someone gets injured, and injured can be anything. It can be bumping into a shelf. It can be anything that would potentially injure a muscle. What
Yeah.
happens is these immune cells come and they eat everything. So they eat good muscle tissue, the bad muscle tissue, everything, and they eat everything. And the only thing that's left are stem cells.
Hmm.
And stem cells are the only thing in our body, apparently, according to this video, that can form into multiple organs, right? Because there's no other thing in our body that can change, right? Our heart isn't going to change in our lung.
Right.
If we cut off an arm, our arm's not going to grow back. All this
It's
stuff, but
kind of like a progenitor cell that
yeah,
turns into
whatever
multiple
you
things.
need, right? Yeah, the
Yeah.
stem cell.
Right.
So what happens is the immunity cell comes, eats everything, and all that's left is a stem cell, and the stem cell then creates cartilage,
Yep.
and which hardens in the bone. And so that's basically how it works. So it's kind of crazy. There's no cure for it.
Yeah.
It sounds like they kind of know, obviously, with that explanation, they kind of know what causes it, but there's
No way
nothing
to
that they've
fix
been
it.
able to do it. Yeah. And there's no way to reverse it. Like once it's done, it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're looking at this picture here, if people can see this, I mean, you're getting an example of somebody's back. This is, what it looks like under the skin and above the skin, and they're twisted and turned. And basically, what you said, they're just being encapsulated by bone over bone, just kind of sealing them down so they can't move. It's got to be awful.
When
It's
I
got to
think
be
like
awful.
the older I get, like I sleep wrong and I wake up, my back hurts and my neck hurts. Like imagine going to sleep and like you just turn or tweak a little bit too hard, and then whatever the time period is, all of a sudden that muscle is bone. You know what I mean? Like any
Yeah.
injury. So that's what's pretty fascinating about it. They said that the youngest patient of this is 3 years old in the video that I watched in this conference that they had, and his
Wow.
arms already fused up, kind of like this, so he can only do this. And he
Mhm.
was still running around playing stuff, but his back had like lumps all throughout it, and that was bone. That was tissue that formed into bone. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, that makes you want to cry for that kid. So difficult.
Mm.
Well, yeah, no cure, um, and it's kind of a bad situation. You almost have to control what damage you take, and it's minor damage. It doesn't take much to trigger this small bumps and bruises. This is another example of this type of disease that affects just this guy's foot. So these are calcification, bone growing on his feet. And for those who are listening to this, um, it's something you
It's
want to see,
nasty.
but you don't want to see,
Yeah,
right?
it's
It's
nasty.
really sad.
I haven't seen
And
this.
a lot of this happens in some of these third world countries where they have zero opportunity for medical treatment for this. But it's not looking good for this guy.
I will say this though, sometimes when we review these diseases and stuff, when the human body acts this way, it just also piques my curiosity as to like, what can we do if we could figure out how to trigger these things?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like again, bone growth. Okay, someone gets amputated, gets an arm amputated or whatever, like that's the end of that. But to hear that there's a way that the body produces bone, obviously in a way that we don't want it to,
Yeah.
like, are there ways, and I'm sure there's people looking at it, to trigger those things to do good things for us? Like one time I had heard that during pregnancy, diabetics, and many times people who are diagnosed with diabetes and then get pregnant, like sometimes it's almost like their body like starts to create
Mm.
and I don't want to get this wrong, so if I'm totally off base, sorry. But I went to a conference once and they talked about this, how it's like a diabetic during pregnancy their body almost starts to perform in a way that is like if they weren't diabetic, right? They still need insulin and stuff, but there was certain things that they would measure that was like, this body, they're starting to act like they're certain features of this disease are almost not functioning normal during pregnancy, and the body's kind of taking over this function better than it normally does, and then
Yeah.
the baby comes out and then it goes back to normal. I don't remember exactly what it was, because obviously people can have insulin resistance and all that stuff, but I just was, I raised my hand during that conference and I'm like, so if that happens, like that has to be something going on in the brain. Is there anyone working on trying to figure that out? Because if you can figure that out, then you could maybe make that happen when someone's not pregnant and then they don't need
Right.
insulin anymore or whatever. And so, anyway, it's just as horrible as some of these things are to watch and to see and just hard to look at and sad, it also is, to me, gives a lot of hope to all the people that dedicate their lives to try to figure this stuff out, because maybe there's a way to use it for some good.
Yeah, that's so true. And in fact, just for everybody out there, I have scheduled a interview which will come around this episode at some point for the topic. Um, it's a scientific breakthrough, really, called CRISPR, where we're able to edit genes. And a lot of these things, in this case specifically, it's a mutation to the gene that causes certain growths, and now you get calcification, you get bone growing. And as they learn and really start to figure out what the triggers are genetically, there's a tool in CRISPR that will be able to hopefully fix that, because it's already showing signs of that. So, everybody out there, make sure you catch my CRISPR episode where I bring in an expert and an author on this topic, and we'll learn all about that. So, yeah, genetics are crazy, and they, you know, whether it's finding a way mentally or spiritually to control the on and off switches or doing it through um, medicine and treatment, I hope all that happens for sure. Okay. So, FOP, which is also Stone Man syndrome. All right. Ready to move on to the next topic?
Yeah.
Okay. Our next topic today is going to be strange animals. Okay. Now, we're going to pull up this first one. And to me, this is, it's like some little alien thing. And it's called the Venezuelan Poodle Moth. And I've never seen anything like that. It was discovered in 2009. It's a new species. And for sure, it's an alien looking moth, poodle like fur covering its head, body, and even wings. What do you think about the poodle moth?
I looked this up. I was like, there's so much weird stuff that we don't even know about. Like, this is like a small. Imagine taking a moth and mixing it with like a poodle, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's like a little cat or a dog. That's what this thing looks like, except with like multiple legs, and it's not scary. I mean, it's just weird. It's just like I'm not used to seeing that.
Yeah. And I think that's what's neat about when we look at these things, that we see the amazing diversity and variety on this planet. And so I know a lot of times we wonder with the possibility of things being beyond, Earth here. Oh, it can only be human-like if they're intelligent. I don't know, because just the amazing variety that's on this planet. Who knows what's throughout the universe? It's crazy. So,
Well, and
go ahead.
don't they say that like there's animals in the Amazon jungle that we don't even really even know
Yeah,
about yet? I mean, there's plenty of stuff. I don't think this is a reason not to look elsewhere, but there's plenty of stuff here to explore too. I think people justify that as not using resources to, go out to space and all that stuff. I think we should be exploring everything. And yeah,
yeah,
there's lots of stuff here deep down in our oceans that are probably freakishly, that we've never even think of or seen before.
yeah. I agree. So this guy's definitely a strange-looking moth. All right. The next one is called Glaucus atlantis, and it's kind of strange. It's also known as the blue dragon. This creature is a species of blue sea slug. Lives in tropical and subtropical oceans, and really they spend their life floating upside down on the surface of water. And they have this kind of gas pocket in their belly that allows them to float on the water. So if you look at this here, you're actually looking at the this animal facing up. So its belly is facing us up, and the backside of this animal is more of kind of a silvery color, which allows it to kind of stay hidden from sea life below it, so it doesn't become food for something.
Is it
But
poisonous?
so it does have some venom in its tentacles. Now, I forgot to check to see how dangerous that was. I do remember them saying you don't want to get stung by this, but it doesn't mean that
Hmm.
that's fatal or anything. So
Hmm.
my bad there in
Interesting.
forgetting to check that. But here's the other thing too, right? Like you look at this, it's kind of an interesting looking animal, but it's really tiny. You see this picture here? It's puny.
Yeah, that's interesting. Hadn't seen a size reference for it.
So their
There's a good chance
body,
people wouldn't even know that they ran into it.
right, right. Yeah, you might swim right by it and never even see it. So the body is a soft shellless body, and it only grows about an inch like this. Um, the other thing that's interesting about this animal is it's hermaphrodite, meaning that it possesses both male
Hmm.
and female productive parts. So
Interesting.
maybe it doesn't need anybody else, just itself. Who knows?
That's weird.
All right.
Where'd you say it was located again?
So you find them in basically tropical and subtropical oceans, and they're just floating in the water.
Weird.
Yeah. Okay. There you go, people. Just a couple of strange animals in our world here that you may not know about. Let's see here. This next section is strange, but becoming less strange in society. However, what we're going to look at today still is on the extreme side, I think. What is the strangest body modification that you have ever seen in person?
That I've ever seen in person. I haven't seen a lot. I've seen people with, like, giant, I mean, just like as big as this headphone, like their ears pierced with big holes in them. That's
Yeah,
probably the weirdest one. The one of the weirdest ones I've seen on video is someone had almost that size, but right here on their lip.
yeah,
And they had all kinds of other crazy stuff that they had, and they were eating something, and they had to, like, hold it tight to, like, swallow. And when they
yeah,
let go, like, spit would come out of it and stuff like that. And I'm like, why? Why?
yeah. Well, I saw the same sort of thing on the cheek. It
Mhm.
was a hole in the cheek, and I'm thinking, how are you talking? How are you eating? I'm not sure I understand. Like
And the
how
fact that if you ever
and why?
don't wanna do it anymore, you can't fix it. Like, that is
Can't.
something when it's that big,
Yeah,
I mean, if someone has, like, a small gauge or something in the earring or whatever, like, that's gonna be, pretty unnoticeable. You could take it out and you go along with life if you ever get sick of it. But that's some serious body modification that there's no coming back from, at least easily.
yeah. Okay, we're gonna look at this first one, which I call horns and spikes. So, um, that's interesting. The spikes. I wonder if that's painful.
I mean, I imagine it's probably not in the bone, but there's probably something under the skin, obviously, that's
Yeah,
holding that in. Again, I just don't understand why someone would do something so permanent. Everything else, like what he's got going on, is fine. I mean,
yeah,
I wouldn't do it, but one day you can take that out if you ever don't want it. But um, it's interesting. I find it interesting that people want to modify like that. I've seen people that have these are at least external. I've seen people that do things like this that are under the skin.
yeah.
Um, you know,
We'll look at one of those in just a minute for sure. I think it's interesting what you can and can't do maybe in society too. Once again, I don't want to judge these people for this, but I do think uh, it kind of keeps them from certain areas. I did an interview of somebody who was a business owner earlier in the year 2024, and he talked about his business gets a lot of people that are a little more extreme in the way they look. And although he's very accepting of that and has no issues with it, professionally in his business, he has to turn some of them away sometimes. And his thing was, I don't judge them or feel bad about, or feel bad for them. I mean, I'm okay with it. Like personally and every other way, it's fine. But I can't hire them because that interface between my customer and them makes it just not the image that I need. So
yeah.
it's interesting. I wonder where some of these people work sometimes.
I agree. It's not like anything personal, but it's just not widely accepted. And sometimes I think people do it because they're like, it needs to be widely accepted. Like, I want to make it happen. And it's like, it's not how culture works. You
Yeah.
can't just force it. You're going to be,
Right.
you know, there's going to be certain things you can't do.
Yeah. Well, this picture right here is I've seen this done in you see pictures years ago from tribes in Africa and places where they do some of this with their lip, and I I just wonder if it's tough to eat with that. I don't know.
It must be. Like I said, the video I saw didn't have it that way. It was like flat up
Yeah.
against the lip. And even that, the guy was I mean, it was like watching a horse eat. I mean, it's just like,
Yeah.
and then he'd have to hold it, and when he'd let
Right.
go, like spit would come out and stuff. I'm like, dude, come on, man,
Yeah. Yeah.
weird. And that was again, yeah, tribes is one thing if that's part of your culture and stuff, but this is just cray cray.
Yeah. Well, this picture here, so you see the lip, the lower lip has this, and then between the upper lip and his nose, it looks like he has a plug in there. So that suggests that there's a hole there too. That would be tough to eat.
And
Yeah.
uncomfortable. Wouldn't you be uncomfortable with that thing scraping against your gums?
Yeah. Yeah. This one, you talked about some stuff under the skin, and this guy here, um, he's got these ridges and bumps on his forehead, in addition to spikes on his forehead, his
Mhm.
head, and these other things across his face. And it looks like he has gauges in his nose as well on the
Mhm.
sides. So I don't know.
Strange.
Yeah, and I personally never talked to anybody with some of this, and so I,
Yeah, me neither.
maybe it'd be interesting to hear their view on why they want this. Okay, so this next one I'm going to show you is something I have not seen before. Have you ever heard of corset piercing? Corset piercing.
No.
Okay. So here we see a young lady who it looks like they've strung her back together with a ribbon. But these are piercings and there's ribbon running back and forth across her back. Tough to describe for those listening to this. You might want to just hop on YouTube and see this. Um, it's not ugly. It's almost fashionable. I mean, it's almost stylish. In fact, if it looked like she was wearing a shirt, it would be neat. But it's actually on her skin, on her back. And
That's what makes
so,
it weird. Yeah, it's
yeah,
not necessarily that it's ugly from looking at it right here. It's just like something's off.
yeah. So we move to this next picture, and this shows a little more clearly, what this looks like. So you can see kind of where it connects on each side of this young person's back. And then there's ribbon being strung across the back and forth. So unique.
Yeah. I just wonder where it's not a knock on anyone, but it's like some of these things are so extreme. It's like I don't know. I feel bad. Maybe were they told that they weren't like did they have self-esteem issues or something where it's like they think they're not good enough the way they are? I don't know. Maybe that's really harsh to say, but that's what I feel like some of these really extreme things. It's one thing to get a tattoo or like a small piercing, but when you're when you're doing this,
Yeah.
it's just like who told you that was cool?
Right. Right. And it would be interesting to hear what people think that
Mhm.
do this. I often think of bodybuilders, extreme bodybuilders.
Mhm.
I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh man, that's awful. How can they move around with all that muscle and bulky like that?" And but they can revert back to normal size, by
Mhm.
just slowing down and stopping. And I guess they could unstring this and be fine here too. But
Yeah, this one's not as bad as the other ones. We're just looking at the with the huge gauges in the cheeks and stuff like that. I
yeah,
mean, again, yeah, this can go back to normal, but it's just I've never seen it before, and it's very interesting. And it's
yeah,
not a style you see very often. Like sometimes people will do things because it's the style. Like right now, there's a big style of like cementing dental cement, like a crystal or a gem on your tooth. Like you'll see people with like
mhm,
little right. Okay. But this
yeah,
is like the corset piercings is yeah. I wonder if this
yeah.
is gonna catch on.
Well, one thing about all these, they look like they're uncomfortable,
Oh, yeah.
and in
How do you
many
sit back?
cases, inconvenient too.
Yeah. How do you lay
Yeah.
down with this?
Right.
Maybe it doesn't hurt, but it looks like it.
Okay, people out there, just sharing with you something different. Once again, not to say anything about these people. Just it's an interesting and different unexpected way of altering your body. So,
Yeah, no. And my comments, nothing's against these folks. They're probably great people. I'm just, just shocked as to, why you would want to modify your body to such extent. So, but yeah, maybe you should get someone on the show and ask them. Maybe that's a
yeah,
perfectly, it's just there's a perspective to every side.
yeah,
Um, Maybe there's a perspective we're just not seeing. We also are living in a different time. Maybe this type of stuff is becoming more common. I mean, it's not like we're super old or anything, but maybe stuff like this is becoming. There's more of a culture of it that we just aren't
mhm,
aware of.
right. Okay, let's move on to something a little bit different. And this is our last topic for the episode today. This one is holes. Holes. Now, what do I mean by that? A bunch of episodes back, we actually talked about the Venezuelan sinkholes. And these things, it's not just there, they're happening in other places too. And so, this particular one that you're seeing on the screen is in Siberia. And they recently, or more recently, found 3 holes that just showed up out of nowhere, or at least people didn't notice them before. This particular one, 165 to 330 feet across, depending on where you're at. That's a huge hole. And they found a lake at the bottom of this hole.
Yeah, they were thinking because around some of these holes, there's a lot of like dirt buildup and stuff on the outer rim.
Hmm.
So I think I don't know if we talked about this or if it was a video that I had seen a while back, but they were thinking it was like gas pockets that just like
Yeah.
combusted.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, the sides, like the inner walls of these things, are so um, interesting as well because they just not so much in this picture right here, but there's some other ones I've seen where it's almost like a clear, smooth cut,
Yeah.
um, and that's strange.
This is different. It almost looks clay like on this
Mhm.
picture. Yeah. So in this particular story, there were 3 different holes that they talked about, different sizes, 50 feet wide. This one, another one that was, close to 350 feet wide. Um, and one was another one they found was only 13 feet wide, but it was over almost 300 feet deep. Man, oh man, you want to be careful
And that's
where
what's
you go.
scary. That would be
Yeah.
scary to see that, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think with that one, like a bunch of like herders found it
Right.
and we're just and I think part of the story is like they're just walking along and they don't because it's like in a herding area and they almost fell in it.
Right.
That's kind of when they found it. Like that's the stuff that's a little bit creepier about that because I would hope that that stuff doesn't like pop up in someone's backyard or something.
Yeah. Well, this reminds me of something. Our family always goes snowmobiling in one area up in northern part of Utah. One of the areas that we go to is by the sinks where it gets super cold and they're actually sinkholes. Nothing like this, but still, and it's funny because we'd gone up there as a family several times, never even knew about it. And one time I just happened to hear the story that these things exist up there. And guess what? I started seeing every single year after that. I started
Mhm.
noticing it. In fact, I think you probably will remember one time we were up there, a bunch of us, and you remember there was this snowmobile that had slid down and was like it fell into one of these things.
Mhm.
Once again, not massive like this, more like maybe 8 feet down. And it took some people of us to help them get out of there. And there's, you know, it's not littered with these holes, but even that place has it. And we have gone snowmobiling without a thought on
Mhm.
those fields many times. So I think,
And they're hard to
yeah,
see while you're going,
yeah.
especially in the snow.
So here we are, sinkholes in Siberia. Um, Another picture here of one. Yeah, we talked about some of the thoughts of some kind of gas or buildup, and there's been a few different theories, and along with that, Some people in that part of the world, Siberia, stray missiles. Maybe it's that, some people thought. And of course, some people say extraterrestrials are involved. I don't know. Different things. Um, and then one theory is that it's a reverse sinkhole. So let me read what this is. There's a working theory that there's a reverse sinkhole that hasn't been scientifically documented yet. In these cases, it's thought that instead of collapsing in on itself, the holes were initiated by an underground collapse caused by melting permafrost. The holes then fill with natural gas, and once the pressure became too great, dirt and debris erupted into the air rather than falling into underground space. So, kind of what you said
Yeah, interesting.
about gas pockets. Yeah. Well, people, watch where you go. Holes. All right. That's our episode for today, man. What do you think? What was your most interesting or favorite topic today?
Stone Man syndrome was the most interesting. Anytime we do these, there's always at least one or two things I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And that was one I had never heard of, and that's why I dove a little deeper into that one, because it was, definitely scary, but also interesting. To understand that the amount of cases there are and how that functions, how the body does that. It just seems bizarre. So that was my personal favorite.
Yeah.
Not my
I'm
favorite.
gonna,
I mean, I hate saying that because it's a horrible condition, but that was the thing I learned the most
right.
from.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to agree with that one as well. I think it's important for us people to recognize what some people go through in life, to one, have gratitude for our situation, and then try to be there and help those people that struggle like that, because we just don't really get it sometimes. And I feel bad for those folks. So,
Mhm.
well, there we go. Episode done. And so thanks again, Anthony. And for the rest of you out there, just remember there's a lot of strange and unexpected in our reality. So remember to keep your eyes, ears, and minds open. And until next time, stay safe.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.